Hello, welcome to our first workshop on Archives Revealed. As you hopefully know, this is a new programme. We've just launched it in the last month, and there are two main parts of the programme. So we have a cataloguing grant strand and a scoping grant strand. The scoping grant strand is going to be launched next year, so this workshop is going to be focused on the cataloguing grant strand. What we're going to do today, hopefully by the end of the workshop, you're going to have an understanding of the aims of the application process, what you need to take into consideration when you're writing a statement of significance, which is one of the key elements of the application process, and what you need to take into consideration when you're communicating the need for your project, which is the other main focus of the application process. The programme in general has 3 phases. The first phase, phase 1, the application will be focusing on significance and need. So that is the importance of your collection and the need for the cataloguing to take place. Now we're doing those together so that we can make sure that collections that perhaps aren't of enormous international significance but are of very clear local significance and have a really strong evidence for need in your locality or to a particular community group will still be able to form a really strong application for a cataloguing grant. In phase 2, if you were successful at phase 1, you've successfully demonstrated that your collection is fantastic, and then you've got a great need for the project. If you get through to the phase 2, that's when we look at viability of the project. Can you deliver what you say you're going to be delivering? How realistic is the project, etc., etc. We've added another phase to the project, which is a post-award phase, because what we want to do is really monitor the impact of the funding that we'll be giving. So we'll want to engage with you to evaluate how you're implementing the project and what impacts you're having over a 5-year period. That might sound a little scary in terms of length, but actually it's going to give us sometimes, you just don't know instantaneously the impact that your cataloguing is having, and so monitoring it over a longer period of time will really help us to see how much we're helping you and the real benefits of a cataloguing grant scheme. So on to the nitty-gritty of what we're hoping to do today. This is the question that you will be asked or one of the questions, in the application form. Please provide a statement of significance for the collection that you have selected for cataloguing. So, why do we want you to write a statement of significance? First of all, we need you to write a statement of significance because we need to accurately assess your application. This is effectively to help us make a good decision for the cataloguing grants to decide which collections, which projects should be funded. So that's the first reason why we need you to write a statement of significance. We need to know how important your collection is. But secondly, there is a wider applicability for the process, because it's a really important skill more widely for fundraising. So you can there are going to be other funders who also ask you for statements of significance, and you can also really use it to help you in your own work that you do in the archive. So it can be really useful to help in collections management decision making and other strategic decision making. So you can use the same framework to really help in your decision making processes within your organisations. So hopefully if you're learning the skills of how to do it, then you'll be able to make sure that you can transfer that into other areas of work, as well as other funding applications that you might need to make. So today we're going to be covering how to write a statement of significance, and we're going to get you to practically have a go at looking at a particular fictional collection and coming up with some of the key elements that you might want to include in that statement of significance. So first of all, to write a statement of significance, you first need to carry out a significance assessment exercise. This is a discussion-based activity that enables you to talk about the collection in question and look at the lots of different factors that contribute to why that collection is really important. It is a really fascinating process, and of all of the significance assessments that I have been involved in, it's one of the archivists and museum professionals and librarians who I have worked with on these have all really enjoyed the process of basically sitting down and actually talking about a collection. So we spend so much of our time dealing with making the collections accessible, answering inquiries, doing all the other things that we do that involve managing your archive, that it's kind of a rare thing to do, to just really kind of indulge yourself and sit down and go, wow, look at this collection, isn't it amazing? Get it out and look at it and talk about it with other people. So it's really, really good. So, you know, if you're doing it, then really indulge yourself in the fun that is related to that, because I think you will all really enjoy the process. So, how to do it? So just in terms of some practicalities. So, you can do it in a lot of different ways, and you really have to tailor that to how many resources that you've got, how much time you've got, and how much, you know, what you want to dedicate to doing the process. So you can do a very short, sharp, quick assessment, but you can also do a really in-depth assessment with lots of different people, and it's really up to you as to what you want to get out of it, as to which sort of model you choose. So do you do it solo or do you do it as a group? You can do it on your own. I think you absolutely can. However, I do think it's better when you do it as a group. I think having other people to have that discussion with, to bounce ideas off, to bring new perspectives in, really, really, really helps in looking at all the different sort of things that you might want to look at when you're discussing significance. You can also, you do need to gather people together in that group who will be realistic about it, so it doesn't become a sort of very navel-gazing kind of exercise, self-congratulatory, aren't we wonderful, what a lovely collection. You kind of almost want somebody else in there who's going to be really challenging and almost play the devil's advocate and say, you know, is this collection really important? But is it? I know you're saying that, but is it? So you really have to really think about kind of what it is that you're trying to say about the collection. You can gather people from within your organisation, or you can gather people from outside. You can bring in some experts in the subject matter. You can bring in some researchers who've used the collection. You know, anything that you like. If you've got an expert who likes that, who uses that collection a lot, then by all means, get them to come in and help you with that significance assessment, because they might know a lot more about the collection than you do. And so that's always a really good option. I wouldn't have too many people in the group though, because then it becomes pretty tricky to manage that number of opinions, and to sort of chair that session then becomes quite complicated. So, you know, I've done one where we had about 8, and that was probably about the biggest you might want to go to be able to manage the discussion. In terms of practicalities, once you've got your group and you've invited your members, book a room, provide refreshments. It's quite draining talking all the time about your collection, and the people, especially if you've invited external people, you know, they appreciate a cup of tea and a biscuit while they're doing it. Provide very clear information about what it is that you're doing, so that the people, especially if they don't come from your organisation, know exactly what it is they're contributing to and what it is you're hoping to get out of it. And then, you know, always thank them in whichever manner you feel free. We should really always have an objective for the discussion, because it can become very wide-ranging. So for this, for us, you know, if you were doing it just for this, then the objective is to get a coverage of the significance of the collection in order to make a funding application. But like I said, it does have wider applicability, so you can use it for all sorts of other things. So your objective might be to determine whether you actually want this collection in your collections. So it's good for sort of, does this collection match our collection development policy? And then you can discuss its significance within that context. And so it's a really useful way of doing some collections management. You can also look at it is this collection of enough significance that we can base a whole exhibition on it, or is it not? So there's lots of objectives that you could have that a significance assessment can really help you make decisions about. Should you have it as a structured or free discussion? So what we've provided you with in the application form, or in the application guidance, is lots of prompting questions that you can use to help with your discussion. And you can follow those in a very structured way. You can have a free discussion about it, and I think there are pros and cons of both of those. Free discussions are fantastic, they flow much better, you cover lots of ground, but you might miss things if it's not chaired effectively. And a very structured discussion might seem a little bit clunky, you might have overlaps, you might think we've already discussed that previously, we did provenance, now we're doing something else, and we've already said that. But equally on those occasions, at least you don't miss anything within the discussion. So, but again, it's entirely up to you how you run that discussion. So these are just some tips as to what I've found works. So, starting off, like I said, we've given you some headings within the guidance for Archives Revealed, and these have prompting questions that you can use to help you structure your discussion. We've developed those from various different sources relating to significance assessments, such as there's some resources on the Collections Trust website relating to a scheme called Reviewing Significance 2, and they have very similar headings. You can also look at the UNESCO Memory of the World systems for reviewing significance, and all of these similar organisations use similar headings to look at significance. So I would say the ones we've selected are kind of a standard approach to assessing significance. Compare yourself to others. It's really important to try and compare yourself to other similar organisations, and that can be quite a challenging thing to do, especially when we're trying to do lots of cross-sectoral work and we're trying to support each other and our collections, but you have to be a bit more cutthroat about it when you're doing this sort of exercise. You very much have to say, we are better than them. And you have to know what it is that makes you better than them. And so you're not saying that they're bad, or you're not trying to say anything negative about another person's collection, but you really need to really work out where your strengths are and what makes you and your collection a really fantastic resource. Remember that not all of the headings that are within those prompts will be necessarily relevant to your organisation. In fact, you might find that actually we're really weak at that. Our collection is really bad at that. So just don't worry about those bits, but really emphasise the strengths that you find. And as you go through the process, you'll find which ones your strengths are, and just in the statement of significance, you just need to emphasise those ones. So I'm going to ask you to participate at this point and shout out, hands up, whatever. What do you think? What does significant mean to you? Anyone got an opinion? Unique, okay. Anyone?
Wanted by researchers.
Sorry?
Wanted by researchers.
Wanted by researchers, yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay, anyone else? No?
Valuable.
Valuable. Good one. Yeah, valuable. In a monetary sense or in a other sense. Okay, how about rare? In sense of archives, what do you feel about rare?
By definition, unique.
That's right. That is true. Yeah, and this is why actually I'm highlighting these ones. Unique. it's something that when you're doing this sort of exercise and you're doing it across collections, it's something that really came out for archives as slightly different. Because very much so, everyone says, well, obviously, all archives are unique. All archives are rare, that's the very nature of archives. However, I still think that it's a really important area to address, even if your archive is an archive, even if the collection's an archive. You'd have a look at uniqueness, because I think, and this might be slightly contentious, but there are different grades of uniqueness. It's a bit, Animal Farm. Some archives are more unique than others. What I mean by that is some collections form similar patterns. So say institutional records, for example, everyone's got minutes. What makes your minutes more exciting than your minutes? What makes everyone's got a billion leases. What makes those leases are more significant than these people's leases? And so you need to just think about it in a slightly different way to really capitalise on what makes your collection unique and rare in those senses. So areas that come up within those prompting questions that we need to discuss are rarity, which we've just gone into a little bit, condition and completeness. So that is whether the condition or the intactness can affect significance. So this might be because the collection is entirely complete and that's unusual, or that it's not complete and that's unusual, or that something about its condition makes it significant. So for example, and this is obviously not an example that necessarily exists, but say you've got a document that was burnt in the Great Fire of London, and you can go look at this beautiful thing that has been damaged, and actually it's the damage that makes it significant rather than the content of the item itself. So you're looking at all different things relating to that area that might add to your significance. There is cultural, historical and scientific meaning. This is a big one, obviously, and can be often the focal point of your discussion. But you need to be clear at this point who your collection has value to. So you need to be very clear about who your audiences are and who you're making the collection significance for. So this might be, it's going to be different for every archive, it's going to be different significance for every audience. So it could be of high value to a local community, but of low value to a national community. So it's important that you understand that value and you really explore it and sort of draw out where the value lies as part of the assessment. Provenance, as with the archive profession, provenance is really very important to us. And archives are usually very good at doing this one compared to perhaps some of the other professions. So sometimes the provenance of an item can really add to its significance if you know who it was owned by. Say it was owned by a really significant person, or you've got a really clear audit trail of who owned and looked after that particular collection. That can really add to your argument for significance. And then finally, sensory and emotional impact. Actually, that's not finally, there's one more. Archives have a great potential to really impact on audiences. And so you need to really look at that. Is it very visual? Do people go, wow? Does it have a really emotional impact? Like the film that we watched at the drinks reception when there were, rats, eating people and things like that. Does your archive represent anything like that? Will it elicit that sort of emotional response? And that can really add to your argument for significance as well. And then finally, it's marketing potential. So this can be really affected by how you're going to use it. Is it likely to have a lot of potential for future engagement activities? Is it going to help with income generation for your organisation? And all of these things can really add, again, to your argument for significance. So before we go on to a practical exercise, which I'm sure you're all raring to do, rather than listening to me just tell you about it. I'm just going to go through a quick case study of a collection I previously worked on, and kind of some of the applicability of significance assessment in practical terms. So at the Royal College of Surgeons, we have a mixed collections. We have museum collections, library collections, archive collections. And the first time we did a significance assessment process-ish was for our Arts Council designation application form, which certainly at that time you had to write a comparison of your collection against all other similar collections, and you had to write what was significant and important about your collection. So what we did is we identified our competitors. So for us it was things like the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh, who we were very much like, we're clearly better than them. And the Royal College of Surgeons and Physicians in Glasgow, and the Royal College of Physicians in London, and the Wellcome, and that's a hard one to argue. It's always hard to argue whether or not you're better than the Wellcome. So we did that comparative exercise, and we looked at the ways that we differentiated from them, what made us, what were our strengths and weaknesses, and what, we really did play the we are better than them game, and came up with what we thought, and then really condensed that down into a comparison. And so the result of that was, in subject matter, our collections on surgery, which includes anatomy, pathology, physiology, and comparative anatomy, we are particularly strong on in comparison to those organisations. And the breadth and depth of our collections we felt was better. We had a strong link to a particular historical figure, John Hunter, and that made our collections distinctive and unique that the other collections wouldn't have had. And in fact, our entire collection, so that all of the museum specimens, all of the archives, and all of the library collections, we felt were more important as a whole than their individual parts. And so that's what our designation application was based on, and we were successful in that argument. And having that comparison between other collections really helped us make that decision. And then secondly, we did a collections review and series of significance assessments, and we used a very structured framework to carry out those assessments, and we looked at, we basically wanted to gain a much deeper understanding of what we had, how it was going to be used, and all the links between those collections that I was just describing. And we designed the framework with a consultant, Caroline Reed, who's a museums consultant, and we had it specifically adapted to us, and we followed it very rigorously. And we did small, medium, and large assessments on sometimes on items, but sometimes on massive collections, and then we summarised those down into significance assessments. So one of those, for example, was on the Grey's Anatomy collections. I presume everyone's heard of Grey's Anatomy, not the TV programme, the actual book. So we had first editions in the library collections of Grey's Anatomy, and we had a fair amount of all the editions, all going up to the most current edition, published only a few years ago. We also had archive collections relating to the proofs of the first edition for the drawings, and it was the drawings that make the first edition more significant, and a few other bits and bobs relating to the authors and their work with the college. So what we were able to do is we got experts in, somebody who was really expert at Grey's Anatomy, and the editor of Grey's Anatomy now, who's a professor of anatomy at King's. So we got them all in, sat them down, we looked at all of our collections, and the things that came out of it were that it was an awesome collection, and that we had an almost complete run, and that was very unusual, and that actually, and this is one of the things that happens, is it leads to more work, because effectively what we then did was we started a proactive acquisition programme to fill in all the gaps. So, which led to another funding application to PRISM for the ACE Arts Council funding programme to purchase a book, one of the early editions, to complement the collection. And because we'd written the statement of significance from that session that we had, it meant that application form was really easy to fill in. We had all of the arguments, we had everything we needed to know, and we got the funding. So it can really, really help when you've done these significance assessments to give you the data that you need to go on and make successful applications.